I have a son who's now 20 years old and a junior in college, but this story happened before he was even born. I was at a lawyer's conference and I ran into a colleague, an accomplished partner at a big law firm who had just had her first baby. I asked her how she was doing, and she said something that really changed the way that I looked at things. She said she was tired, that being a working mom was harder than she'd ever imagined. She told me that when she was with her baby, she felt like a mediocre lawyer, and when she was at work, she felt like a mediocre mom. Whoa, that statement has stuck with me throughout my career and helps keep me centered. You see, while I'm ambitious and high achieving, I could live with being known as an okay professional. But because of who I am at my core, I knew that I not only had to focus on being a good mom someday, but a good daughter, a good friend, a good sister, and a good wife. These relationships are what mattered most to me then and what matter most to me now. Years later, I read the book Lean In, and while some portions of the book resonated with me, one that didn't was the concept of feeling so guilty about being a participatory mom that you had to make up fake appointments on your calendar in order to actually go and spend time with your baby or with your children. In fact, I wrote about it in an article to commemorate my 50th birthday, and I called the article Leaning In con Sabor. I'm an immigrant from El Salvador, and con sabor means with flavor. And so I wanted to add a little bit of the flavor and a little bit of the difference that is the reality of being a working mom who is also Latina. And the interesting thing about it is that centering myself on this idea of family as my anchor ended up having almost no negative effects on my professional success. You see, I subscribe to the philosophy that an upcoming speaker also subscribes to and will be talking about, that you can have it all, but not necessarily at the same time. But this North Star really became not only a part of who I am and guided me throughout my career and helped me stay drama-free as an individual, but it was also important for me to create that kind of bond, that kind of kinship, that kind of trust in the people around me, whether they were my colleagues or people who reported to me. So I had faith that staying true to me and to my values would create a drama-free environment. And I'll end this section, this shift that we're talking about at first, with a story so that you don't think that I'm all rainbows and unicorn. I often talk about myself being a pretty sassy Latina. And because no drama-free leader who has faith in herself isn't also brave and blunt. So I was in a leadership team meeting and a male colleague made a comment about a candidate who had dropped out of consideration to work with us. She said that the office was simply too far from her home and therefore too far from her 2-year-old. This leader, a man with 4 kids who also happened to have a wife who stayed home, and I knew to be a less than involved dad, had the audacity to say that the stated reason made no sense. After all, he had 4 kids and he managed just fine. Earlier, there were questions about how people handle microaggressions, and for me, snark has always been my secret weapon. But my reaction was also rooted in the faith that I had in myself and in my values, and in this case, especially rooted in living the values and serving as a role model to other working moms. So when this colleague of mine said this, I turned to him and said back to him, "You're right. It's commendable that you juggle working and being the father of 4. But before we can determine whether this woman's reason for bowing out of the process is legit, I'm going to ask you 4 questions. And if you can answer all 4 questions, then we'll continue our discussion. First, what's the name of your oldest child's math teacher? Next, what shoe size does your second child wear? Next, what's the name of one parent in the carpool for your 3rd child? And finally, what's the name of your youngest child's dentist?" Now, my goal wasn't to embarrass my colleague. All right, it was kind of to embarrass my colleague, but my true intent was to call out hurtful comments that would negatively impact other working moms. I needed to make sure to call out this kind of bias. So kinship involves using your privilege not to be a savior, but to be a champion for those who may not have your privilege. I was in radical kinship with the other moms in the room, especially the ones who were too afraid to speak up.